Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss technology and hardware solutions for enterprise. My name is Andrew Jones with Rahi, and we're a California-based technology solutions provider with locations across the US and the world. We take a consultative approach to provide design, products, and services to fit the real-world technology needs of corporations just like yours. Our goal for this webinar is to provide you with the information you need to help solve any challenges you might be facing today with your environments and arm you with the resources you need. Since the start of the pandemic, we've received a lot of questions around what technology and hardware can be used to improve the daily experiences for our teams, and how can we make that experience seamless to all users. While it is a common problem, the solution can be unique to each environment, which is why it is important to bring a solutions provider like Rahi into the conversation early to help identify the needs and what technology and hardware will best help solve these challenges. For today's webinar, we wanted to bring Zoom and Logitech into the conversation, since these two companies have been at the forefront of solving these challenges through their products and technology. They have placed an emphasis around solutions for enterprise and communications. Their focus and goal during COVID is to engage individuals and companies with a very immersive experience while simplifying the technology for users to make the experience seamless. During this call, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we will address these at the end of the discussion. After the webinar is over, the email address and phone number for Eric Horn on your screen is the best point of contact for support. So joining us today, we have John Stearns, who's a Zoom Room specialist for enterprise, and Gino Zahari, the Director of Alliances and Go-to-Market at Logitech. Good morning, Gino, and thank you for joining us this morning. Maybe you could kick us off with a quick introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. John, great to see you, as always. It's funny, we've been working with Zoom for about 9 years now, and the goal is to help Zoom progress as a complete enterprise experience, or provide an enterprise experience across the entire enterprise platform, if you will. At Logitech, we've really focused from keyboards and mice and headsets and webcams. And it also spans into what we would call Zoom Rooms, or this rooms area in which our collaboration together has basically delivered a tremendous experience. But it's really the wrapping of the wheel from Zoom's use cases all the way up to the different applications they provide that deliver this really enterprise-grade experience. And again, it's not always just the Rooms environment, but it's also how do I better that experience from the desktop experience that most of us are using right now at home, As we go back to the office, what can I expect when I go back? I want that same unified experience all the way through from desktop all the way into the Rooms environment. Zoom Rooms is a wonderful space in which we can go and collaborate together. And at Logitech, we make a plethora of different solutions, whether it be a PC or a Mac-based solution that you're deploying with the Zoom Room software, or in an appliance environment. So it's all about choice when it comes from Logitech and Zoom on what is the right topology for your environment, not necessarily trying to force you into a specific use case, but let your use case define the technology that you put in those spaces.
Yeah, and thank you, and Andrew, Gino and Andrew. As mentioned, I'm John Stearns. I'm responsible for Zoom Room sales for the enterprise segment. I'm excited to be here with my friends from Logitech and Rahi, and it's great to see so many people tuned in today for the Zoom Room session. It might actually mean that there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, and returning to the offices, at least in some capacity, is upon us in the near future. I know I'm personally excited to get out and see customers and partners in person again. So to expand on what Gino was saying, as rooms are going to look a little bit different when we get back to the office post-COVID. The good news is that what we're doing with Zoom and Logitech, we've built solutions that really fit the needs for our customers for any room size or type. So everything from your huddle spaces to small and medium-sized conference rooms to boardrooms, all the way up to your larger divisible spaces, and even use cases like webinar studios and that type of thing. So with all these different solutions, the one thing you can count on, though, is that the user interface will always remain consistent. It's simple, it's easy to use, regardless of the room shape or size. Our mission at Zoom's always really been to provide an easy button for meetings, and that goes for conference rooms as well. We want to remove any unnecessary complexity and friction, so there are less points of failure in these rooms, and more importantly, these rooms are easier to manage on the back end for administrators because they're not always going to be in the rooms or on site moving forward.
Hey, John and Gino, thanks so much for the introductions. And I'd have to agree that, with the increase in interest around these conversations and upgrades and, how do I solve for this? It's definitely signaling to us that we're coming to a point where more and more people will be coming back into the office, and more of these conversations need to happen so that everybody can reopen successfully. So, I'd love to dive into this further. So with that first topic around returning to office. So a challenge prior to COVID and really becoming even more present now is the best and most efficient way to manage devices and reduce the amount of headcount on site needed to support this. Gino, can you start us off and discuss what Logitech has done to solve for this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you kind of hit it. I mean, how do we manage these devices? And when we think about from Logitech's point of view, it's not just managing, one or two or three devices, but if I'm managing, thousands or 10,000s of devices across my network, right, that are using either off the shelf PC or Mac to support that, or even appliances, how do I do that? So Logitech rolled out a service, if you will, a free service called Logitech Sync. And Sync is really a management platform where I can monitor and look at my devices, but also push firmware updates to those devices so that they're always in proper running order, of course, with the Zoom software. It lives in parallel with ZDM that I think John's going to talk about in a few moments here. But Sync is really our free version of device management. And it's not just looking at the health of, let's say, a mic pod on the network to make sure that it is picking up audio signals or if it's disconnected, but it's also, most importantly, pushing out the latest firmware to those devices so they run optimally. It's very key, but it lives in parallel with what we call ZDM. And Zoom, it's basically Zoom device management that I believe John will speak to next.
John, you appear to be muted.
Yeah, I think.
All right.
Hey,
Andrew.
John. Yeah. Hey, John, I think you're muted here on your call.
Look at that, the Zoom guy muting. Yeah, Gino, you mentioned scalability earlier, and that's really important because Logitech has a lot of really great plug and play Zoom Rooms options. The Rally Bar series, for instance, which really makes deploying these devices in volume very simple, and everything from configuration to setup to the actual physical deployment. I mentioned I'm responsible for the Zoom Rooms practice in our enterprise segment. So I work with our largest customers who are really looking at hundreds or even thousands of spaces. So scalability is incredibly important. In conjunction with ZDM, where you can manage all of your Zoom Room appliances, you can also manage everything from a single pane from a Zoom platform perspective. That goes from meeting and webinar licenses to Zoom phone and chat, all the way down to the appliances and devices in your spaces. This makes managing things like software updates, troubleshooting, remote support, analytics, and dashboards very easy to navigate from a Zoom perspective.
Thanks, John. Logitech Sync and ZDM are definitely strong adds to support the challenges around how to manage these devices. As we start to talk about room deployments, I'd love to share a case study on how this has been done successfully globally through a large enterprise.
Video has become an embedded part of who we are at F5. Logitech's really enabled us to scale globally. We do Zoom Room implementations all around the planet.
We were more or less forced to work remotely, and then there was a shift, and now it's pretty much normal to work remotely by default.
We know we're not going to be going back to the same office we left, and video is really the way that F5 is staying connected internally.
Having Logitech as a partner with us in helping us adapt a video-first culture is huge.
La alianza entre Logitech y Zoom es muy fuerte. Los productos se desarrollan constantemente en conjunto, uno para el otro.
I've set up almost 100 rooms in the last couple of years, and every single one of them is a Zoom room. We use Logitech meetups for the smaller ones and rallies for the larger meeting rooms. It's how it should be. You unpack everything, you connect it, and then it just works.
With Zoom and Logitech, you can really come up with different use cases to suit your needs and scale accordingly from the small meeting room right through to a large auditorium.
No veo forma más sencilla de hacer una videoconferencia que no sea con una Logitech Tab y Zoom Rooms. Esa integración entre Zoom Rooms y la Logitech Tab es fantástica.
If you're looking for something that's easy to use and cost effective with scalability and availability worldwide, Logitech and Zoom together are a huge, huge home run.
I think it's pretty amazing to see how easy and flexible the idea of a global rollout to really bring consistency to an enterprise can be with the right planning and hardware to build that strong culture throughout your company. And I really do think that most employees do not want to return to the same office experience they previously had. I think this is a great showcase of how it's possible to kind of reinvent the experience inside the conference room and video in general, as we start reopening. So, now that everybody's been working from home, we've really gotten used to that equal share of real estate during a video call. As we start to see more and more offices reopen, how do you create a better experience for participants that are physically in the meeting room versus people that are in the meeting remotely?
Yeah, Andrew, I'll take this one first. This is a really important discussion topic that comes up in almost every single customer briefing that I'm a part of. And people have just grown so accustomed to consuming meetings in what we call gallery view or the Brady Bunch. That really goes for their professional meetings as well as even sometimes on their personal side. They've been doing virtual happy hours and family reunions. So they really, love that equal real estate, as you mentioned there. And they don't want to return to the office with an outdated view of what the meeting room is and lose that consistent view of every meeting participant, regardless of whether they're speaking or not. As the next piece is, as people remain socially distanced in the rooms, they'll be further spread apart in these spaces. So it's going to be tough to, see faces equally and that type of thing. So, even with intelligent camera tracking, you'll get a good view of who's speaking in the room, but you might lose visibility to some of the other meeting participants, who are not actively speaking. Our customers really want these meetings to be democratized, giving really everyone an equal seat at the table and equally represented regardless of where they're joining from. This is really why we designed and developed our Zoom Smart Gallery feature, which is set to release in the July timeframe on our Zoom Room appliances on Android first. And with Smart Gallery, everyone's going to have equal screen real estate space, whether they happen to join from home or whether they're sitting in a conference room with other colleagues. This is honestly one of the more exciting and innovative capabilities I can remember in my 16 years in the industry, and something that's definitely unique to Zoom and Zoom Rooms. Yeah, and I know, Gino, you guys are doing a lot on your side too. So you want to talk a little bit to the right side?
Yeah, absolutely. When we started making our cameras intelligent, the first and foremost activity was to worry about framing, right? You kind of mentioned that earlier, as far as how do I auto frame participants in a large meeting space so I can see the context in which people are communicating in that space. We're very excited to be working on, of course, the API that's been released to the hardware manufacturers world to develop the smart view or the smart gallery. But it all started with us on how do we auto frame folks intelligently in that space. And it's also when I get up and I maybe move over to a whiteboard, an analog whiteboard, or I'm moving around the space, how do we capture that activity so that I feel like I'm included in that environment? So lots to come there. In addition to auto framing, what we call right site, we're also counting people. And that is making sure that we're able to give the administrator or folks that are looking after the real estate the head count in those spaces during those that meeting time. And a lot of that has to do with what do I do with the space now? If I'm using a conference room that maybe held 16 people, only 4 people show up to use that space daily, day after day. How do I maybe think about redividing that space up so the real estate can be used properly? So right site, in addition to people counting, kind of go hand in hand as far as making intelligent decisions about meeting spaces, but also again about learning where those subjects are in that meeting room, so I'm able to frame them properly to give that best experience to the far end user. So, yeah.
It's just a great adaptation, as we start to get back to the office, to really listening to what the end users were asking for. I remember just a few years ago, to try and explore having an experience like this would be near impossible without spending your entire budget on, 3, 4 screens across the front of a wall, all built in, multiple expensive cameras throughout the room. And realistically, we're seeing that now with just software adaptations, that we can really get that immersive experience, without having to dedicate entire spaces just so 6 people can go sit in a room and make it feel like everybody's in the same space. So I really love the progression that's been happening, across that side. Safe reentry to the workplace is a challenge that all companies and businesses are currently trying to solve for. Gino, can you start the discussion around how you prepare for this, and what are you doing around touchless devices in the conference room?
Yeah. Well, obviously we make a product called Tap, which says touch me, tap, right? But about a year and a half ago or so, we worked with Alexa for Business and Zoom on deploying, using your voice to actually start a meeting, or using your voice to operate a meeting. And it's not necessarily, Alexa, start my meeting if it's on the calendar in the Zoom room, but also things like, what is the Wi-Fi password for my guest that's sitting here next to me, right? And she would tell you that. Or where's the next open conference room because we're being kicked out of a space. So using voice to operate has been accentuated based on the whole COVID situation we're in, and then not touching shared surfaces. But you'll see this Alexa for Business roll out in appliances as well. So we're very excited to have it across the entire platform. But using your voice to drive that is key. One key thing I should note is Zoom's had this feature for a long time, and it's you might know it from what we call proximity sharing or direct sharing. That is when I walk into a conference room space with my laptop running my Zoom meeting client, my personal client, and I'm in a Zoom room, there's a pairing relationship that can happen inside the Zoom room. In the world of Tap, which is our controller, it will actually emit a tone that the microphone of your device hears, which makes this wonderful paired relationship. So now I'm given the option to share my content in a meeting room or start my meeting in that space. How does the Zoom room know I'm in that space? Well, that's done through this ultrasonic pairing feature. And that one feature alone from Zoom just opens up the world of, basically I don't need to touch anything but my own personal device to drive this experience for myself. So.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit we're doing to make these spaces more touchless, as Gino mentioned there. So really, without needing to even touch the Zoom room controller on the table, if your employees don't want to, they'll have the ability to control their meeting room experience from their phone, their tablet, or their laptop. Everything from starting the meeting to sharing your content, or even annotating on top of content. That's becoming more and more important. So, as someone's sharing content and I want to actually start to circle items or brainstorm on top of that from my iPad in the room, those capabilities are now available. And the in-room experience will now be consistent with what everyone's come to expect from virtual meeting experiences.
Yeah, I think as we've seen, everybody working from home now, kind of getting used to using your own devices over these last 12 months have really changed the expectations kind of going back into the office, right? I'm used to using my computer, my phone, but even in that conference room, we still want to make sure that we're providing the best experience possible so that people don't have to just necessarily use their own devices to run that meeting inside the room. So as people start opening and going back into the office, we're seeing that this typical style of room is changing. Can you talk about a little bit about what you guys have seen and what this looks like with the, quote unquote, new conference room?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. Prior to the pandemic, it was the huddle room rage, right? Everyone was, in the open floor plans, and we needed kind of private spaces or comfortable rooms we could go into and actually collaborate. And it's not necessarily always over a video call with someone on the remote end, but how can we actually, be in the same space and connect to those that are elsewhere, but also share content in that same meeting space. So rooms are getting bigger, and that has a lot to do with kind of the social distancing that we're starting to see, respect each other's space a bit. But rooms have now gotten larger, and with larger spaces, the requirements on the hardware manufacturer come into play as far as how do I pick up voices that are in those rooms in the best way possible? How do I mic up a space so that we can sit 6-7 feet away from one another in these larger spaces? How do the cameras, right, auto frame or give us that gallery view experience? So spaces have gotten larger. That would be number one. The second point I want to bring up is making sure you're putting the right technology in those spaces. We're all very much accustomed to having these wonderful tools at our desktop. Zoom's annotation feature, being able to really drive that Zoom experience for me personally. I want that same experience when I go into a meeting space with others. I think what you're seeing now, on the slides are really two parallel Zoom rooms. One is a touch experience or an experience driven from a controller, right? And the other is in parallel a touch experience from Zoom, where I'm actually now using the large format display in the room to actually drive a whiteboard experience. So depending on the use case in those spaces, making sure, one, you're putting in the right tools for those users so that they have that same experience that they once had at home, but now they're in a public space or in a space with their coworkers, and not limiting that and having people having to make choices of where do I do what type of function, making sure it's very much an equitable experience in any space possible. And you can do this with Zoom rooms in a very easy way. So.
Yeah, that's great, Gino. In addition, on the Zoom side, we're hearing customers ask for better ways to manage things like their open working environments and open working spaces. Some customers are going as far as to move away from dedicated individual workstations completely, referred to kind of commonly as hot desking or hoteling. So with our room scheduling solutions, users can actually reserve their personal or shared space on the fly if they happen to be in the office, or they can do that in advance as well. I don't think our customers sometimes realize that with a single Zoom room license, you get unlimited room scheduling display panel capabilities there. So you can deploy as many room scheduling panels as you would want throughout the entire organization, including spaces that may not have Zoom rooms on the inside or any video solutions on the inside. Additionally, you can deploy as much digital signage to as many monitors throughout the entire enterprise as you'd like. That's just part of the Zoom value add, part of the platform. So sometimes eliminating the need for costly third-party signage solutions. And I want to touch on signage a little bit more because it's a great way to push out things like marketing and branding and company communications and upcoming events. And historically, it's been, those have been the use cases, but it's also really great for health and safety information right now. To keep your employees informed and safe as they re-enter the office. You can also use signage for things like emergency alerts. You can broadcast Zoom webinars or meetings to those signage monitors as well. You can even integrate with wayfinding solutions. So when your employees walk into the office, they have better visibility into where they can quickly find either individual workstations or shared space like conference rooms that are available. And then with signage, you can also collaborate around these monitors. So if I want to huddle up with Gino and discuss an upcoming presentation, I can wirelessly share to any of these digital signage monitors. So you really don't have to deploy any additional AV equipment for these displays. Lastly, as we capture more and more data in the rooms, you can really start to see how many people are in the meeting room. You can track some of the environmental data like air quality and temperature in particular spaces. This is really great information to have to start setting things like capacity limits to enforce social distancing, keeping people safe as they re-enter the office. It's also helpful to look at this data over time. So you can start to make informed decisions about the spaces in your buildings. So if you've been building rooms for 8 to 10 people, but your data is showing that only 2 to 3 people, are ever really in rooms simultaneously, you can rethink what those spaces are and what goes into those spaces.
Andrew, you are muted.
John and Gino, I really appreciate the the information this morning, the conversation around that. Definitely very informative going there. I did want to reserve the last 5 minutes for a few questions that have come through in chat here. Simon, if you could start with the chat questions.
Sure. The first question is, can ZDM provide firmware updates for USB peripherals connected to Mac or PC platforms?
I can take that one, Andrew. So ZDM can't push firmware updates, let's say for Logitech peripherals, through ZDM to the actual device. So we're talking about, let's say, a Logitech peripheral attached to either a Mac, right, or a Windows PC. In that scenario, we would use Logitech Sync, right, to push the firmware update. ZDM is going to work great for managing the operating system, right? You're going to enroll your Mac or your PC into ZDM for the OS updates, all right? But for those peripheral updates, we're going to need to use Logitech Sync to drive those updates in the USB world.
All right, and our next question is, I have offices in multiple other regions. How can I get support in deploying Zoom rooms outside of the US?
Yeah, I can hop into that one. So, deploying globally is definitely a challenge, and not many companies are in a strong position to help. I think that's where Rahi's a little unique, and we have offices in over 30 countries on 6 continents. Rahi's also one of the only global certified Zoom integration partners, and we have experience deploying these worldwide. We really excel, kind of with the planning, design, and rollout of these projects. We really take the approach to make sure that the technology can stay consistent around the world, so that there can be global standardization. I think you heard in that case study how important it was to be able to deliver the same experience, and you're not going to have a great end user experience or kind of managing the devices if you have different hardware in every location around the world. Some of the other things, we have the ability to do in-country billing, procurement, and integration in most major countries around the world. So really here, I think it all comes down to planning and making sure you have the right partner in place to support.
All right, and the final question we have, it is really important for my users to have whiteboarding capabilities in conference rooms. How can Zoom support this need?
Yeah, guys, I'll take this one. So whiteboarding is becoming increasingly more important to our customers as part of the collaboration experience. Again, going beyond face-to-face video and sharing content, but people actually want to co-create and co-annotate and that type of thing. So today, the in-meeting whiteboarding experience, it has a robust tool set of colors and ink weights and even auto shape detection that can be brought to life in Zoom Rooms for Touch, as Gino mentioned earlier. But really where we're taking this is from an in-meeting tool to a persistent tool, meaning you can work on whiteboards over time, before, during, after meetings, or over the life cycle of a project. And then taking those canvases themselves and making them infinite. So you can continue to elaborate on whiteboards and move them over and continue to grow that whiteboard that will be available to all participants on their own devices as well. You'll start to see things like the ability to add smart objects and pictures in here, as well as virtual sticky notes that can be color-coded and organized according to your projects. The big thing here is that this is not just going to be an in-meeting room tool. This is going to be available to all users on their personal devices like phones and tablets. So even in the room, again, some people might be reluctant to touch the Zoom Room for Touch screen at first, but they can still participate in the room from their phone. They can add an annotation or add a sticky note and that type of thing. Going to get really exciting later this year, where we really start to get to the next level of actually pre-populating templates for project work streams and things like that. So, whiteboarding and annotation is definitely a huge area of innovation and development right now for Zoom. Lots of excitement there.
We did have one more question sneak in. Alex Billups asked, maybe this was covered earlier, but what is the difference between a Zoom room and just a computer dedicated to a meeting room with Zoom?
Would you like me to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. You can hit it first. I'll come over the top. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We've been seeing a lot of Logitech conference cams, right? I mean, the beauty behind a Logitech device, you can plug it into, to your laptop. And if you're running Zoom on your laptop, you have that personal experience. I like to look at Zoom, the way that we're using it, maybe all of us right now using our laptops, is it's my personal Zoom space, right? This is me. I have my own peripherals attached to my client and I'm doing it, using it. A Zoom room is a resource. A Zoom room is a resource in which now I call into that space. I invite others to call into that space. The physical space in which the Zoom room is deployed in is attached to that space. So it's a neutral environment. And as John mentioned earlier, all the benefits of being able to run that as digital signage or even broadcasting your meetings to anywhere you have Zoom rooms running is the key there. So I like to look at it from our Zoom desktop or Zoom meeting client is my own meeting client attached to a peripheral. A Zoom room is really more of a resource for the entire environment to be, part of that, part of the space planning or part of the space. So I don't know, John, it's a very high level, but maybe you can jump into some of the details.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's typically, the Zoom meeting client is reserved for individual users, which they will host meetings from home and in the office and that type of thing. But they're occasionally going to need to participate from conference rooms. And that's really where that shared resource, takes advantage of Zoom Rooms, which is the software we built very specifically for that shared space or for that conference room use case. And some of the, the innovations we talked about earlier with Smart Gallery, and even just the simplicity of pre-scheduling it, walking in, seeing your meeting right there on the controller, and having that one tap to join experience is really, where we bring to life the Zoom experience into conference rooms with Zoom Rooms.
And I always like to say it creates a controllable experience as well. So it's a consistent experience that what's in the room, what hardware's there, and what the end user is going to see, as opposed to relying on Wi-Fi in the building, somebody's laptop coming in, a dead battery, things on that side.
And we have
so with that, we talked a lot about how Logitech and Zoom can simplify the enterprise experience. If you have a need for these solutions in your space or just want to know how to optimize your current space, reach out to us here at Rahi. We have experience rolling out Logitech and Zoom solutions in a variety of environments, both big and small. So bring us in for your next project and allow us the opportunity to deliver a better experience for your users. You can reach out to us via email or give us a call there. And thank you again for joining and taking part in today's discussion.
Thank you, Gino. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, fellas. Appreciate it.